Welcome. So my name is J.R. Logan, and I am not a professional video editor. I am an individual who from time to time needs to put together some clips and was frustrated with the various software I had tried that was out there, and found DaVinci Resolve after doing some research online, and really appreciated the level of sophistication, but also just what you can do with it. It's very full-featured. So the first question with a free professional level video editing software has got to be why is it free? And this is professional level software that they use on advertisements and feature length films and those sorts of things. My understanding, I don't have privy to the DaVinci Resolve folks, but my understanding from reading on it is Blackmagic, which is the company, primarily is a hardware company. And they have very specialized control boards and cameras. And what they are hoping is that by making this software available, that those beginner filmmakers who start on this software will later on upgrade to their studio version, which has a few more features, but this is a very full-featured free version, and will start buying their hardware. So that's what I'm assuming the motivation is. This is not open source, so it's not the free open source that we try to use when available. So I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to take you through a very basic workflow of putting some clips together from a trip and editing those into an order, trimming them down, and publishing them. There is a ton that you can do with this software. It's just impossible to fit it all in there, and I am not the expert that would be able to take you through smoothly. So we're going to stick to the basics, and if people have questions, particularly at the end, we can go and try and explore it together. But I'm going to try and stick to just fundamentals to start. I'm going to share my screen, and you should start seeing DaVinci Resolve. We're going to be using DaVinci Resolve 16, which is freely downloadable on their website. They do want some information so they can contact you for sales in the future. The first thing to understand about it is that your orientation is based on a workflow that's along the bottom of the page. So you can see that there are several options. There's media, cut, edit, fusion, color, Fairlight, and deliver. And we'll walk through what each of these mean. What you do is you start with media. And inside of media, you have these dockable browsers, or windows, sub-windows within the big window, that can be moved around and hidden and revealed. So if you're having trouble bringing in media, make sure that you have these visible. You can browse your hard drive. And I, for example, have videos right here, and I created a little folder called Canoe Videos, and then it's as simple as dragging those in. But when you show the folder, they'll preview right here. You can get file names, or you can get little previews, and then you can actually scrub through them, so you can get a preview, and you can drag them into your collection that you're working on. So I'm going to take from the bigger set that has lots of videos. What I did is I clicked on, this is one trip where we actually went underneath Hartford with a buried river. And so I want that. I don't want the one after. I can hold down Shift and click the first one, click the last one. That selects them all. I could also select them one by one. And then I just drag them down to this bottom area. Now, I had previously done that, so this is what you would get from that. I also had added a MP3 video. I'll take that out just to show you. So you're going to move this clip. You don't need to work within this browser inside of DaVinci Resolve. I can go and look for that new video, and this works for video clips and for audio. I'm going to shrink this a little bit, and I'm going to find where that river crossing went. All right, now I have this river crossing audio. And just to demonstrate, I'll pull in an unrelated video and just pull in the very first one. I could just come in here and drop that video into the box. Now I have the collection of videos that I am working with. And the next stage is really to go to the cut area. And I'll take this one out because it's unrelated. Yes, I'm going to remove it. Now, these videos are just references to where the files exist in your operating system. And if you move those files around, that will cause havoc. So be sure that you're putting them in a logical place for the period where you're expecting to be able to edit these. So what cut is about is bringing together those clips. We have the subset of clips that I've selected, and I can click any one of them, and I can just drag them down here. So you have two timelines. This timeline that will show you a preview with the audio, and then this is an overall timeline of all of the clips together. And you'll see, as I add clips, you'll see it's a little, it'll show the breakpoints where those clips merge. On top, you'll see this little red tag with a line, and that allows you to move within your timeline. And across the whole software, when you do operations, it's generally in reference. If you're going to slice something, if you're going to add something, insert it, it's being, it's in regard to where you have put this marker in the timeline. I can play the video.
There was an open gate, kind of a little ramp you could come down. And
now I'm doing a bit with broadcasting the video and so on, so I think you're probably going to get some lag and some choppiness, but this will play through. You can also use this little arrow where if you click it and then drag side to side, I can scrub back and forth. It's kind of like if you've ever been in professional video editing, there's like a little wheel and you can move frames back and forth. And it moves faster if I move the mouse more severely. This, this little icon here is a play button with fast preview. So it will play through my videos kind of using this algorithm. So it will, if there's more movement and activity and faster clips, it'll slow down where you want to slow down and speed up in other spots. So it's a very quick way to kind of just blast through your video and see what you have. I'm going to add a few more clips in order that we have something to see. So right here I have my first clip. I'm going to pull in my second clip. You can see that you both have it on top and bottom, the expanded version on bottom and the contracted version on top. I dragged it into the bottom, but I could also have dragged it in up here, and you can see it previewing coming in. So I'm just essentially adding a linear collection of my clips. Now, my clips have a lot of wasted material in them, shots that aren't very good or very interesting, or that have, for example, this one has, we'll play it. I'm putting the camera down, and it just has these parts that are unnecessary. There's a black spot there. So the thing that I can do is trim it. When you come down to your dialogue down here, there's these little icons that appear. There's different ones depending on where you are, and they have different functions. What I'm going for is just slightly inside of the clip, but still near. There's a picture of a bracket and an arrow and a clip. And what I can do is I can pull that in, and it will trim. So it's cutting off the ending. So I don't want to show this just dead space where I am putting the camera down. I'm going to pull it in. There's my backpack. Okay, I pull it back to the shot that makes sense. Now, conveniently, when I'm in the edit mode, you'll see there's a little preview in my monitor up here, and it's showing me where it would cut off a few frames behind or a few frames below. And you can walk through those frames by clicking on this little back and forth that appears while you are trimming your clips. So I'm going to go here, and I can even trim within this. So same thing. I'm pulling that in, and I'm pulling that in. Now, in a real video editing situation, you would take a look at what you have, and you would be making choices about what fits. Because we're demonstrating, I'm just going to go ahead and select a few of these clips, and we'll play with them. Another thing about DaVinci Resolve is that you can add layers. So you don't have to just work with one clip that plays all the way through. You can go and add on top of it. So I'll pick something cool. This is us lighting like a flare. You can put it on top on the timeline here. So now what you have is this video will play underneath, but as you get to this portion, you're actually seeing the video on top. This is depicted both in the timeline and below on the expanded timeline. So you could almost edit you actually could edit your whole video, dragging and dropping and trimming inside the cut editor. And then you could go right to the last step, which is deliver, which renders your image. What I'll show you is the edit portion. And what edit is meant to do is cut is really, this is the analogy, of course, is film. They would very quickly cut things up, and then you're tweaking and trimming and really going into more detail in the edit section. But if I wanted, for just those folks that need to clip a video together, I'll jump over to the Deliver tab. And in the Deliver tab, what you're going to do is you're going to set up what type. So you have to do this first. You have to select how you're going to render your image. There's various presets. So this YouTube and Vimeo and these other standards for video are different types of ways to render it. And I will need to choose a location. So I could just say in my videos and say test, save. And one thing that confused me a little bit is you really need to add it to the queue before you start render. So I had come over here and was clicking the start render. Why aren't you rendering? In order to render, you click add to render queue. Now, it's when you click go, it's going to do this. Now, the reason they do that, I think, is because if you're doing a really big video at very high quality, you may have several of them, you work all day, you add them to the queue, and then you start the render and go for a canoe ride or sleep or whatever you might do that's not editing, because it's going to be using your CPU and hogging your machine for that period of time. So if I clicked start render, in a little while, we would have this film all sliced together, ready to be uploaded to YouTube or whatnot. I'm not going to do that at this moment because we need the CPU processing power to talk about editing. So let's go, we've done the cut. Let's go into edit. So edit's going to bring a slightly more complex version of what we had pulled in. And you can also bring things in, just like you brought them in the cut editor. This has all of the powers of the cut editor, plus more. So we're going to work with what we have brought in. And you'll notice at the top, it's a bit disorienting at first till you understand what's happening. But there's two monitors now, rather than just the one monitor. So one monitor is for the active media. So I can click around in this media on the side, and I can see what's going on in that media. The second monitor is only going to show you what's on your timeline. So clips are in this one, and the timeline's here. A way that you might use that is to figure out, you're hunting through and you need to add a clip. You're going and looking at, okay, this is, I'm scrubbing through, I want this one. I'm going to go through, I'm going to find where it should start. And so what you can do is, I want to start it here. I can edit it right up in this window, or I can trim it before bringing it in. This little arrow with a line, I've started the start point, and I can find where the end point is. And now, at the bottom of this are two options: a waveform, which is the audio, or the video. And all I need to do to bring it in is I can drag this over here to this other monitor, and then it will say, do I want to overwrite? Do I want to replace? Do I want to insert? Do I want to put it on top? So it will give me all my options, which I think is really convenient because it can be a little confusing to try and get the right plot spot or bring it across into the timeline otherwise. There's cases, though, where this audio in the background is just kind of junk audio. It's us bantering in the background. If I had a narration, I may not want to bring that audio in which case I could just click the little film strip and bring the film strip in by itself, or vice versa. If I just wanted to bring the audio from the video in, I click the little audio form and you see this little note comes in, and I can bring that in to the clip. I can also just bring it in down here directly. So there I am bringing it in on the timeline and dropping it in. And I'll just show you bringing just the video in by bringing it over here. And I'll say place on top. Okay, so, and it brought it in and it placed on top right there. Then I can move this clip around on top. I could also have inserted it. So an insert, I go right in the middle, where she's by that pillar, and I'll do an outside one so it's clearer. So we have that clip we're working with. I'll pick a, the canoer's coming at us. All right, just a little tiny clip. And I'm going to bring it in here, and I will insert. And so now it actually broke that video in two, and it should have inserted it. Yeah, so that was a very short clip, but it was there. Now, it might be worth clarifying what this timeline looks like on bottom, because it's getting more complicated. Now I can scroll up and down. You can see our little insertion here. You can see the other things that we've added. We can move all of these around and use this to scrub. So once we've inserted all our clips and trimmed them and added, we don't really need these 2 monitor videos. I find it confusing to have 2. In the top corner is a little box, and that box takes us down to 1. And it takes us down just to the timeline. So now when you're editing, you are just working with the timeline. You can still bring in clips from other places. So if I wanted to bring that clip in, it can come in, and you can even move them between the different layers. I can, just like the other one, you find the edge, and you can pull and trim it in. The trick on this timeline is that there are ways to vary it with hotkeys and so on. If you move things, it will create gaps, and it's not just going to zip everything back together. So if you're trimming something down, you might have to move things. You can click and drag outside of an area and then move a whole group of things around. You also have lots of different ways that you can look at your timeline. There's a little box right here, and when you select these options, it's going to allow you, for example, I'm turning on the waveforms for the audio. We can see just the beginning and the ends. We can break it down. If you had a lot and everything was labeled, maybe this would be a nice way to look at it. So you have different options for how you can see your timeline. You can also zoom in and zoom out of your timeline. So this drag option right here allows you to zoom in and zoom out. You can zoom to different preset levels as well. You can, these are options for muting your one channel, for example. And another option is, let's get a clip which has a transition. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, then use the scroll bar to come over. All right, there's a transition, and I can click up top here to get the little scrubber thing going. Oh, so I'm really zoomed in. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. All right, this seems a little more reasonable. One thing that's common is you like to fade in and fade out. When I hover over top, you can see that there is these little white boxes. And rather than a trimming option, you have this option. And it creates this curve that goes across. I'm going to drag the 2 in on this, and I'm going to play it. Hopefully we'll see. It was almost too fast. I'm going to do it on, especially because my computer's taxed at the moment. I did a nice long transition. So it blacks out, and you're controlling over what period that transition is happening just by dragging this piece here. In the case where you had audio, so these 2 clips, this is a clip that I put on top with my flare, and I can trim it down. I can, fade it in so that you see it's fading in over top very slowly. I'm going to fade it a little faster. Okay, and I can extend it a little bit because there's still clip behind it. I only trimmed it. It's not gone. It's just sort of hidden when you're using this this tool. I want to get rid of that audio. I should be able just to come down here. I can get the audio form, so I can click on that. And I can So that one way to do it is to lock the video so the video can't be changed. I think I can just delete that audio, and that audio is now removed. I can also do some fun things with audio. So I'm going to pull in a MP3. This is just something I downloaded off of YouTube. It's called River Crossing. And all right, so that's good. I like that. I can place it somewhere. I think maybe my timeline, when I changed it, to not have, there we go. That's what I wanted. And I can also fade this in and control a little bit of how that fade is shaped. I can also work with the audio, dragging it up and down, and it will change the overall volume of the whole thing. So I'll demonstrate that. Okay, one volume, and bring it way down. So you can see that volume changing. In the corner of the audio is this little picture of like a wave going up and down being filled. So I can turn that on. And when you've turned that on any audio track, it's going to give you some additional options. Say in addition to being able to trim the audio, I want to really blast it at this moment because there's connected to the video, there's a climax. What I can do is I'll take my controller to that point, and this is a key point. I'm going to add a point there. I'm going to go over here, and this tells you what the shape of that point will be. I'll add a point here. So now I have these two additional control points, and I can, so there's I'm going to do a slow increase right there. And then I can add another control point with this. So there's another one. Okay, there's another one. And down. So now when I play the audio, we should have a rising and so in that way you can really sync up music and lower it at a very specific point so that you can hear the person talking above. You can overlay clips, like in an interview where somebody's talking, you can have them in that main line, and then on the layer in top, they start talking about the project they've built. Now you're showing, you could drop pictures in there, other video, and start to show what they're working on. Those are the real fundamentals of this. There are effects. So there's an effects library. You can click in the upper corner here, and there's transitions, there's titles, there's all sorts of things that you can do with it. There's also a couple of options that I would consider advanced but might be worth knowing about, and that is that is things underneath Inspector. So you can come inside of the Inspector and get some additional options. For example, we can transform this image. So we're going to change the. We want to be at one where we're actually, because when you have this layered, so I think this is blocking this one. Let's transform this one. Oh. Right, well, we're just gonna put that on top. All right, so I am rotating this just by coming in here and working with the transform. I can zoom in. So I've rotated, I've zoomed in, I can change the pitch. I can do all of these items. The other very cool point of this is that you can use these same key points and then mark different spots in the timeline and animate those just by having transitions between them. You have cropping, and you turn them on and off. Overall, dynamic zoom. Image stabilization is one that you might want to use. It's as simple as clicking on the image. And then there's different algorithms for doing a stabilization. You can just use the default one. Sometimes if you play around with different options and different settings, one will be better than the other for stabilizing. Obviously, there's some additional settings you can see here about how much it needs to crop in order a little bit in order to have the movement or the buffer to be able to do the stabilization. So the settings for the stabilizations for that clip, and then you'd click stabilize. You'd select multiple clips. So now you've stabilized your image. It gets more advanced than we would think about are things like lens correction. So different types of lenses, you can compensate for that lens so that things appear well. There's also settings for audio. It does have, and there's a full audio editor in here. I'm not super experienced with the audio editor. Just in the timeline, we can see the channels that are embedded within. There's 2 channels in this particular clip. And if I go back, let's see if there's a... So when I click on this clip, well, they're tracking with each other fairly well in this part of the song. All right, so at the very beginning of the song, it looks like there's separation between the 2 channels, and we could get into working with those. And then there's various other elements we can do with transforming and modifying the bands. Those are too advanced for me in this session, but just to know that if you are interested in diving into that depth, that is there. I'm going to jump on just to give you an exposure to that there is this Fusion tab. So what Fusion is as you have transitions, or if you have a news program and you have text overlays and things that animate and move around and do things, this is where you would add those elements to it. But you could actually do it in Edit as well, but this allows you more control of those effects and that magic. That's why there's a little magic wand there. I haven't used this. I don't feel qualified to teach you about it. I know that these options are about adding and transitioning and changing things. The next tab over is color. And this is one of the first things that DaVinci did. And in fact, they're like the market leader in color correction and color matching for your videos. So there's a situation, particularly if you're shooting with multiple cameras, where you might have different types of color. Maybe you've moved between sunlit lighting and you moved into lighting that is indoors, and you need to correct that color. This is where you would do it. So I'll just show you. We'll just play. You can do all sorts of things. You can save settings. You can slowly transition things, and there's a lot to it. But probably the most useful for the basic user is just these color wheels down here, and you can move them around in order to have different corrections. Essentially the saturation, all of these other elements. And each one, if you get too far, can be reset with this little reset button and go back to your default settings. So you can go through your clips, make sure they're all matched up. There are all sorts of things. So for example, when we're looking at this clip, we are looking at the instantaneous graph of how many pixels appear of each of the different colors. And we can shift that not only through that color wheel, but we can bias so that we are affecting more pixels in one part of the spectrum than the other. We can also isolate particular colors and turn those up and down. There is a ton that you can do with changing, modifying, and improving color. Again, you could just skip this whole screen. You do not need to play with color in order to use Resolve, but it's good to know that you have pretty much every tool you could imagine to fix your color. Then you get into this tab before Deliver, which is the audio editor they call Fairlight. And you have a mixer board, you have channels, you have all sorts of tools to be able to work with your audio and mix it in and make it work. It does have noise canceling and reduction, all of those types of things. Again, not necessary for the very basic level of video editing. Well, you've gone through that whole process, and now you're in the deliver phase. So you do everything, you preview it to make sure it works well, and then you click Start Render. I've one last trick for you. If you're working with a computer that has not great CPU, one thing you can do to get better performance, particularly if you're working in a very high resolution, is right here in, I think you can do it in other screens, but it's just in the first one. You can, there's an option that says optimize your video. Should be in here. Reveal, generate optimized video. So if I clicked generate optimized video, it's going to think for a moment. It's basically going to create a shorter thumbnail version of that video that you can use when editing. And one of the options at the top here is to use optimized video when available, which I think is checked by default. And that will speed up your editing work. And then it will still use the full resolution when you go to press the deliver button. So if you're dealing with a little less than a stellar computer, that will work. I think that is the bulk of what I know. So I'm going to jump over to questions that have been coming in text. And once I've answered the text questions, we can go to audio questions. So I'm going to take them in reverse order. So live audio. I presume, I can only imagine it has live audio. I've never used live audio narration over top, but I'm near certain that you can do that because it has all of the sorts of features similar to that. I'm not sure where that option would be. It'd probably be in Fairlight. And I see it says ADR. I don't know. Oh, so there's a record thing. And then if I play, can I record? I would suspect it's in this menu. Can green screen effects be accomplished? Yes, they can. There's all sorts of chroma key. It's called chroma key, and you can do chroma key within this. I would need to refresh myself on exactly how chroma key works within this, so I'm not going to demo it for you, but it is certainly capable of chroma key. Can multiple screens be assigned to the system? Yes, there are options within the workspace, and I know that there are, so dual screen mode can be turned on, and then you can have dialogues and editing in one screen and various options in the others. So I understand it is optimized for dual screen in the workspace and then dual screen mode, and then there's a deep set of options that you can do below that. Is this downloadable? It is. It is free and available. If you search DaVinci Resolve 16, it is free. It is not open source. You can download it from their website after filling in some information about yourself, so that if you were a big company, they're going to want to sell you their more advanced software and their hardware. Stereo versus mono or channels. I think I answered that. It is all available. You can absolutely work with multiple channels and audio. I am not an expert in the audio capabilities, which are substantial within this program. Jog wheel. Yeah, so the virtual jog wheel, which is the wheel that you turn, is that little scrubber button. Blackmagic would be happy to sell you a physical one that you can plug in and operate, since that is their business. All right, useful classes. So I think I have just answered the questions that people had queued. I am happy to try and to answer some questions people have if you want to unmute.
Hey, JR, I had a question about the color tab.
Yeah.
Is there a quick wizard type thing for doing a simple correct on lighting across multiple clips? It sounded like you were going to touch on that at one point.
Yeah, so you can select multiple clips. You should be able to just click on one, and then I hold down Shift and click on the other. There might be other ways to multiple select. Can I drag? It doesn't seem to drag.
Well, past just multiple selecting, but correcting across the, like, can you just select them all? Oh, okay, are you getting into that?
So so I'm not an expert. I can affect all of them now by making those changes. So my corrections are manual here.
Okay.
I'm making those corrections, and now that's being applied to the multiple. Is it being applied to the multiple? It might not be. There are certainly ways to do it, and okay. I would have to play around a little more for how you apply the color across all of them. And you can even save settings and apply those settings and transition those settings. So absolutely possible. But as I said, I have only used this for very simple video editing, and just barely touched these other capabilities.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
Okay, I have a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
What version are you showing?
I'm showing the most recent version called 16.
16, okay, yeah.
Yeah, if you're using before 16, it won't have the cut menu, which is essentially the simplified editor.
Oh, okay.
It'll just go right into edit, which works just fine. But I think for a beginner, it might be nice to have that simplified drag and drop sorting tool before you get into the advanced editing.
Yeah, okay. The machine I'm going to put this on has got High Sierra, and it looks like there's some question whether 16 does or doesn't work well with High Sierra. So I'll have to do a little more research on that.
I know it is compatible with, well, yeah, Mac, Linux, and Windows, which is great. You can use it on all the operating systems. And I can't speak to if there's a compatibility issue with a particular version, unfortunately.
Have you strictly just used in-camera audio so far, or have you tried using any external audio recorders? There's some means of syncing up a separate audio recording.
Well, just like the music that I overlaid, you could record audio separately and then bring that in and overlay it. I haven't tried recording it directly into the program, but we did we use this for making some of our safety videos and our orientation videos and so on. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we will dub a correction over top. And it's easy to record and then just work with that audio within the timeline.
Yeah. Okay.
There's also an option on audio that might be useful to people called normalize audio. And it's the same way as the, you just click, I'll go to cut, and or maybe it was media. And I think there should be an option on here called normalize. Or maybe I have to go to audio clip. But what normalize does is it removes it regulates the audio so that the audio volumes will match up. And if you have clips taken in different environments and you go through and you start normalizing the audio, it will help to make the transitions better. And of course, now that I'm showing it in person, normalize audio levels.
Yeah.
There it is in the menu. So I think the two things that are most useful in this menu would be normalizing audio, and the other one was rendering optimized media for the video and normalizing audio for the, so I click that and it's going to give you options for different algorithms, and then you can change some settings about the target level, and you click normalize and it will bring it there. You can still further manipulate it with those tools I showed you, but it gets you to a baseline, which would be a good thing to do at the beginning. So all your audio is at the same level, and then you can manipulate it.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions? All right. Well, hopefully this has fulfilled the objective of giving you the tools you need to do basic editing, as well as shown you that there's more depth that you don't have to take advantage of, but you can take advantage of if you are trying to do something more advanced. I do see actually there's some chats that popped up. Okay, so there's a link to some training videos. Yes, and there's tons on YouTube as well. And just search for the specific version so that you're not dealing with a older version. Things change and it might get confusing. So I believe that concludes the very basic introduction. Thank you all for participating.